my first performance was I played the Sheriff of Nottingham in Primary 1. Oh no, I think that before that, when I was 4, I played David in David and Goliath at the church. And the minister there, a man called Sandy Tate, knew that I was destined for good things because he went out the room to do something, and when he came back he said I was practicing my lines on my own, and I was just in the church on my own, but I was practicing and rehearsing on my own, and he thought that showed, you know, that I was really serious about it at the age of 4. And then I played the Sheriff of Nottingham because I was the only person who could say the Sheriff of Nottingham, and so I got that part. It was a good casting, and that's when I was in Primary 1 when I was 5. So I remember doing little school plays there, and then later on my performance was much more a musical thing for me, or poetry or something. There was a time where I didn't really do plays. I didn't really want to. At school, I was so serious about becoming an actor that I was quite arrogant about it, and I didn't really want to be in them at school because I thought I want to wait till I do it properly. However, I remember playing in a Molière play called Sganarelle, and I played Sganarelle in that, and that was good because we rehearsed after school, and it was full costume and you know, little stick-on moustaches and long wigs and stuff. So it was kind of foppish and fun. But most of my performance would be music. I played the French horn. I was in the pipe band. I was a side drummer in the pipe band, and I would do, you know, poetry readings at musical evenings. And because I was so into music at school, it's the thing that I was the strongest at. I wasn't very academic. My schoolwork was okay, but it wasn't brilliant. And where I was interested, I was most interested in art and music, and not very good at anything else really. So school became that for me, you know, to the point where I wasn't then allowed to do both. There came a point when you're 13 or 14 when you have to choose your subjects, and they wouldn't let me do art and music because they thought I was copping out, they said. And it was purely that was what I was really interested in, so it was a shame. I think my first memories of theatre were going to things like the pantomime, and it would have been the pantomime at Perth Rep Theatre, and that would have been my first experience of theatre. And then shortly after that, I saw my uncle Dennis Lawson, in a couple of plays when I was quite young. I think we came to London and saw him playing in the Half Moon Theatre and some things like that. Those would be my next memories of it.
Does anything stand out about that? I don't know, like Arrival, the curtain call, or...
Yeah, I mean, I remember always, I always remember kind of falling in love with someone on the stage from being really wee, you know. I remember it would be one of the dancers in the pantomime or something, and I'd find that I'd be totally in love with her by the end of the show.
Do you think that...
I'd dream about her for weeks and weeks afterwards.
Really?
You know? Yeah, really, seriously. And then, but I remember going on stage somewhere after seeing Jack and the Beanstalk when I was really wee, and seeing the big boots. You know, they had these giant boots at some point for the giant, and seeing that and realizing that, you know, it's that was an interesting moment from seeing the magic of it to then seeing the reality of it, how it works. But as a child, it doesn't detract from it. I still found it really magical.
Did you know at that stage that was something you'd want to do, or was that something that happened later?
I was 9 when I absolutely knew I was going to be an actor, and before that I probably wanted to be, just because my uncle, I think, because he was so diverse and interesting, and not like any of the people that I grew up with. I came from quite a small town in Scotland, and a kind of farming community, I suppose, and my uncle would come back up from London and just be completely different from everyone else. So I suppose initially I just wanted to be like him, and then I by 9, you know, I was obsessed with like old movies and black and white films from Hollywood or Britain, and wanted to be an actor completely.
Was it as much about the fact that he was different, it was his personality that you'd met and you thought, I don't have to be like everyone else, or was it the idea of performing?
Well, I think probably initially, I don't know, because it's difficult to remember exactly what came first, but I'm sure it was about, you know, this kind of mystique that surrounded my uncle, and when people seemed to treat him differently, or there was there was something special about him that I couldn't put my finger on then because I was too young. But certainly, you know, when people would, there was something very different about him, and I liked that. I was attracted to that.
Did you come across theatre in school at all, or drama in school?
No, I don't think so. I went to a school called Morrison's Academy in Crieff, and I went there from the age of 5 right through to when I left when I was 16. And I don't. We were taken to see theatre. We were taken to see with music mainly. I seem to remember going to see things like Gilbert and Sullivan operettas, or once we were taken to Stirling. What's the centre called in Stirling? The McRobert Centre. And we went to see I think The Marriage of Figaro in the McRobert Centre. So I seem to remember being taken to see more kind of musical-based theatre things, which I suppose you are as children. You're less likely to go and see serious, you know, plays until you're a bit older, I guess. But those would be my early memories at school. I don't remember anyone coming into the school. I don't remember seeing like a touring company or seeing actors come to do a play at the school. No.
What was the sort of first time when you saw a play and it kind of really hit you, the sort of power of it?
I mean, the first really powerful experience I had in the theatre was when I was 16, and I'd left school and I was working at Perth Rep Theatre. I got a job there helping put the sets up and take the sets down, and I was part of the stage crew. I'd move furniture on and off of the stage during blackouts or when the lights are down, and occasionally they'd give me a little kind of walk-on part, you know, or a little extra, if you like, an extra part. And there was 2 young, they're called acting ASMs, actors who are usually in their first year out of drama school, or maybe it's their first job in the theatre, and they have to do a certain amount of stage management work backstage, and they get to play, you know, from smaller parts on in the main house, and sometimes big parts in the studio theatre if the theatre has one. And at Perth Repertory Theatre, they just opened the studio theatre, and the 2 of the acting ASMs who I was working with, and I felt kind of, you know, they were older than I was and they'd trained as actors, but I was working with them on a daily basis, and I watched 2 of them playing in The Caretaker, in Pinter's play The Caretaker, and I think it was the combination of knowing them and then watching them do this incredible play. I mean, it was the first time I'd seen the play, and it is an extraordinary piece of writing, and I was completely changed by it. I remember my mum took me, and afterwards we were coming out and she was saying, "Did you like it?" And I couldn't speak. I was so kind of elevated by it. I couldn't speak to her. I just was so moved by it. It was beautiful. And I remember huge parts of it, you know, because sometimes a play you've seen many years ago, you remember the feeling of it, but you don't remember the moments in it. But I can still remember, there's a great speech that Ashton, the character Ashton, has in it, played by Kenny Glennan, and I remember it was the room is lit, and then during the space of this one maybe 2-3 minute long speech, where he's talking about having been in a mental institution and that they fried his brain, and as they're talking about it, the lights just went down until the whole stage was dark except for this tight spot of light around his face, and it was so slow that you didn't notice it, so suddenly it was just all dark, and you were so focused in on what he was saying. It was an amazing moment of theatre, and I, you know, I remember lots of bits. It was Kenny Glennan, and Liam Brennan was the other actor who I was working with at the time. Our acting possibilities at school were after school. If you were in the drama group, or I think it was called the drama group, then you would have, there was no time for that during school time, so it was something you have to do after school. Whereas music, you know, we did have music during the school time, and so I could rehearse, and then I'd get to perform. So it was either once a year there would be a kind of, our school had houses, so, and the kids were split amongst these 4 houses, and then there would be like an inter-house music competition once a year where, you know, whoever could play would go and play, and the rest of the school would watch. And so it was a really big event because the whole school was there, and you'd either sing a song or play a guitar, or I used to play, you know, French horn, and you'd practice up to that. And I remember, you know, like acting, you would rehearse, you'd practice up to the performance, and then very often it would just be the one that after the entire music competition was finished, that was it. Or then there'd be a school's music night, and that's where I felt that I was able to. Because I think for some children at school, especially children who don't feel that they're particularly academic or don't feel that they're very special at geography or history or maths, then music for me made me feel kind of special because I was quite good at it, or at least I wanted to work hard at it to the point where I felt I was good.
Did you find that process of performing gave you more confidence?
Yes, I think it gave me a sense of, you know, being in the pipe band, for instance, gave me a kind of sense of pride. I loved being in a band. It represented something very Scottish, and my father had been a side drummer, my uncle had been a side drummer, I was a side drummer. But, you know, it was in my blood. I'd heard pipe band music all my life, and it's something I still love to this day. Wherever always in the world, you can hear a piper somewhere. There's a busker somewhere in Australia or wherever you are. You very often hear the pipes, and I still love it. And it made me feel. It gave me a kind of sense of identity. I was in the pipe band, and then later that became I was the drummer in the school rock band. You know, and that again made me feel good because I felt like there was something quite cool about that. And at break, you know, at lunchtime or break time, instead of going off and hanging out or smoking behind the bike, I was going off to the drum room so I could practice the drum kit, and it gave me a kind of motivation towards that. You know.
It sounds like you had a pretty, I don't know, active school. You know, the people were organising drama after school.
Yeah.
And there was a rock band and so on.
Right.
Were there particular teachers at the school that were kind of?
Our music teachers were quite. I mean, the drama seemed to come through music, as opposed to I think nowadays you might find it comes from the English department or. Whereas, you know, the theatre in my school, at the English department, was much more about sitting in class reading bits of Shakespeare or something that nobody was really that excited about. And the easiest way to make it more exciting would be just to have cleared the desks to one side and get up and do it. Just that alone would make it infinitely more interesting. Because sitting reading it is an exercise in reading the words on the page, but trying to make them alive, trying to make those words into things that people are saying to one another is what theatre's all about, and if we'd done more of that, I think that would have been more exciting. And that's what music was, you know, because you were up there, and or the poetry readings in the same respect, you know, when it's a performance, you know, with an audience, and you're trying to make sense of the music or the words in the poem, you know. But it was a very, I mean, now I consider myself very lucky musically because I found it's been so helpful in my life. I mean, because I find rhythm in everything. You know, walking down the street, there's music in everything. You know, and I've got a sense of it. I was taught it. I feel like it was kind of nurtured so that I'm, and it's what I'm trying to pass on to my kids. I find music really important in life, and I think it's a terrible shame nowadays that schools are, you know, don't have instruments, so kids don't get music lessons, and it's, you know, it becomes more and more academic, the school world, I think, which is a shame for the kids who aren't academic. We didn't have a drama teacher at all. I mean, we had the guy that made an impression on me in drama at school was he taught typing and what's it called, home economics, is that right? Probably doesn't even exist anymore, does it? Anyway, he was a typing teacher. He was the guy that directed the plays that I was in. But we didn't have a drama teacher.
What made a good teacher? I mean, what were the ones that?
I think someone that excited, that made the subject come to life. You know, someone that made you want to learn it. You know, I so many of my teachers, I never really understood why I was learning any of the stuff. They didn't really. I missed the point, or maybe it wasn't really made very clear that any of it might be of any use later on in life. And now I look back and of course it could have been, you know, and it would have been. But I didn't realise at the time, I just thought it was stuff you had to get through. But actually, you know, a teacher that makes the subject accessible and makes it come to life so that you actually are interested, you want to learn about it. I mean, I remember doing years of geography, And then towards the end, before I left school, we got sent out to do this geography field trip, you know. And we were suddenly in rivers, measuring distant floating tennis balls down the river, measuring the speed, and suddenly I went, oh gee, this is what geography is. It's about it's about the land. I never really paid any attention before, you know. I missed the point. So I think teachers have to, you know, the responsibility is to teach that subject, but also to make it really valid and make the children realise why it might be important, or excite you into wanting to know more. I wrote to Perth Repertory Theatre for years asking if I could work there. And then when I was 16, I did 6 weeks of my 5th year. So I had 2 years to go. I had my 5th year and then my 6th year, and then I thought I would be allowed to leave school because it was finished. But my mum and my dad, I was very unhappy about this point. I was getting in trouble a lot at school, and my mum and dad said to me one night that I could leave if I wanted to, and I never thought for a moment about it. It never crossed my mind. And so that night, I said, yes, I'm going to leave school. I was half-term, the first half-term back, and I never went back to school after that. And so I wrote to Perth Repertory Theatre and said, please let me work for you. And we got the usual letter back saying, you have to train, you had to, you know, I wanted to work in the stage crew. They said, well, you had to have trained as a stage manager, or as an actor. You can't, you know, there's no jobs. I think it was mainly because I was still very young. I was just 16, you know. And but the week I left school, or the week my parents said you can leave if you like, I wrote to them, and my mum phoned them, I think, on my behalf. And that week they were starting rehearsals for Passage to India, and they needed Indians to be running around, and the director wanted the Indians to be kind of running around the back of the auditorium and using the whole theatre, so not just the stage. And so she needed, it was Joan Knight, she's a very famous director, she's dead now, but she was a very famous kind of grand lady director, and certainly in my part of the world. And so they needed extras, and so they said, okay, he can come and be an Indian. So I had to put on, kind of darken my skin a bit and wear a turban and run around the stage, and I got to act on stage in a professional play, you know. And I because I was doing that, they asked me, you know, I had to help with scene changes, and I think I helped even put the set on the stage for the first time. And I was so keen, and probably very annoying to the other actors, but terribly keen and very full of myself. I remember having a conversation with Kenny Glennan and saying I'd never do an advert, and I'd never do a soap opera, and they were working actors. They were going, God, I'd give anything to have an advert, and give anything to be in EastEnders or something. But at the time I had a very high horse, which I still have, I think. And but it was there I started to learn about what I really wanted to do, which was acting. And I feel like my life changed that first day I walked in there. I stood on the stage, and the director, Joan Knight, was in the darkness. You couldn't see her, and she was like, darling, 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 could you move to the left? And I didn't know which darling she was talking to. Am I a darling? I didn't assume that I would be the darling, you know. And but it was wonderful, and I started being able to watch professional actors in the wings. I watched them from the wings. I could watch them warm up. I learned about stage management, what they did. I had no idea, you know. I think most of all I learned about the discipline of the theatre, that to make this magic happen on stage, there's a very strong discipline required backstage and in the wings. And people, I was able to watch actors through rehearsal and be amongst them on stage while they rehearsed. And for 6 months I worked at Perth Rep, and it was the best thing that happened to me. It was really, it set me on my way, you know. There I heard about this one-year theatre arts course in Fife, in Kirkcaldy, that I went and I auditioned there. I auditioned in another theatre arts course in Telford College in Edinburgh, and I was accepted in both, and I chose to go to Kirkcaldy because I thought it sounded like the better course to me. I mean, who knows? And I had a great year there. It was a very good year, very hard, because there we had to do stage management, we had to act, we had to do everything, make the costumes, publicise the show, and we had to put four different shows on a year. One of them being in schools. We did a schools tour about racism, a play that we devised ourselves about racism.
You taught that around schools in
Scotland.
Right.
I mean, not all over Scotland, but I think in Fife, certainly. I think for a week or 2 weeks we toured it to different schools. And it was good, you know. At the time, our director, Lynn Baines, knew about racism. She'd seen it with her son, and there was a kind of myth that there wasn't any racism in Scotland at the time. You know, we're not racist up here, but she'd had bricks through her window, and you know, and so it's very clearly that there are, you know, and I think that's what's very powerful about theatre and education, is because children are so very powerful. You know, if they see a play that tells them something that they weren't aware of before, like racism or whatever it be, you know, it makes a huge impact in the world later on when they grow up. Like I see it with I've seen it in 2 instances recently that have really touched me. One was in Africa, in Malawi. I went to Malawi with UNICEF, and I spent a week going around the different parts of the country, seeing how AIDS and HIV had affected that country. And at the end of it, I watched this little theatre troupe arrived in this village I was at, and they put on a play about HIV and AIDS, about how you get it, how not to get it, and what to do if you get it, and everything that we'd seen with our own eyes was incorporated into this funny play with very larger-than-life characters. And there was maybe 4 or 5, you know, I'd say teenage to maybe 24 or 5-year-old actors in the play. And I watched all these tiny little kids watching the play in this dusty village in Africa. And I thought about my daughter, who knows an awful lot about the environment now. My eldest daughter's 9, and she comes home and she tells me so many things about the environment that she's learnt at school that I didn't get taught when I was at school. So I know that her generation are going to be far more careful with the planet than we've been, you know. And I thought about these African kids in this village, that whereas now, you know, AIDS is a terrible problem there, whereas because people don't really know how you get it or what to do if you get it, whereas all these children are watching this play and they do know now, so when they grow up, you know, it'll have a huge effect on the world. It'll make less people will get AIDS because these kids from the age of 2, 3, 4, 5 know all about it, whereas before we didn't know anything about it. So I think it plays a really strong, and our little play about racism, you know, maybe I found in when we would tour in schools, there was always a bunch of guys at the back who were the kind of hard guys, you know, who thought it was all just a load of rubbish and didn't care, and at the time it used to really upset me, and now I don't care about them, because I think for most of the audience of kids, they're quite into it. You know, it's a special event when actors come to the school and suddenly put on a play in the school gym or the school theatre or the hall or wherever it is. It's an event, and for the majority of the kids watching, I think they're really keen to see it and listen and take it on. I think kids love it. They take on board theatre really well. It's very well suited to them. It's better than the telly. When I was in drama school in London, at the Guildhall, we did a tour of we devised a show about grief, dealing with loss, and it was quite difficult because it was quite a hard subject. But we had this great, I can't remember the name of the director now. This lady came in, and she directed shows in theatre and education mainly, was what she did, and she was quite ballsy, and she said, look, we're going to do this, I think we should do a play about this. So we devised a play about somebody who'd lost their brother or sister, and it was terribly it was very tough, because when we went and performed the play in schools, some people in the audience had lost a brother or sister or a parent, and would get very upset. And it was a very good lesson in many ways for me, because I learned there that you're so responsible for what you do as an actor on the stage. You're responsible for what you're saying. Now that doesn't mean you don't cover difficult subjects, or you don't play bad guys, or you don't, you know, but it means you're responsible. And in this case, you know, when there was one performance where 2 or 3 people had lost a brother or sister or a parent, and were crying in the audience, and as we were doing the play, we all felt that we were, you know, torturing them, because you couldn't stop the play. We couldn't stop because 2 people got upset. And in actual fact, when we spoke to them afterwards, because what we did afterwards was then we were available to everybody to discuss what we'd done and the play, and we didn't just do the play and go away, you know. And then it seemed that the people who had been really upset were very happy to tell us about their experience of loss, and although it had been upsetting to watch our play, it helped them because it made them feel that, you know, their feelings weren't unique, and that other people felt, you know, dealt with it in the same way or not, or that it wasn't. I think the worst thing is when you feel like you can't talk about something, you know. So it was quite important in that respect to be there afterwards for those children.
Because so often they might not have anywhere where they can talk about this sort of stuff.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's because it's live, because it's actors performing. There's something terribly intimate about that. And if you're watching a play about loss and you've lost someone, you know, you feel very. It's for you. It's for you. You know, and that's very powerful. More I think than reading an essay about it, or well, that's not necessarily true. But I think it is a very immediate and intimate thing, and in that respect, I think it's very powerful. It can mean a great deal to the people watching and to the people performing it. You know.
You must feel quite far removed from, you know, a big blockbuster film. Where
Yeah. Sure. Well, in a movie it's different because you don't really get to see the. You have to imagine in a way how people might react to it, and unless you go and watch the film with. When you sneak in the back of I have done that. You sneak in the back of a cinema and watch a film you're in with a real audience. Then you can feel the kind of true reaction. But other than that, you never really know. It's more about it's different in the film, I think. It's more about there's differences between theatre and film. Not as many as you would think, but.
Can I just ask? Because it seems I was speaking to someone yesterday who said that, you know, Scotland in general doesn't embrace people who stand up and say, I want to be someone, I want to be successful.
Yeah.
But you seem to know that from the age of 9.
Yes.
Did you have much hostility? Was there...
No, and people would. I would say I want to be an actor when I was 9, and people would laugh. You know, I mean, people would. Is it? And there was a sense of. People would laugh because that's what other people do. You know what I mean? But there are lots of Scottish actors, and there's, you know, I knew. Luckily, I knew, and I was really. I had my uncle, you know, who was an example of somebody who from Scotland, from my small town of Crieff, who had become an actor. So it wasn't impossible. He did the really brave thing by becoming one in the first place, you know. In many ways, he'd kind of laid the path for me, you know, in terms of me realising that it was a possibility. But there is that in Scotland. There is a sense of... There can be a sense of it's what other people do. But I'd like to say it's anyone could do whatever they want to do, you know. There's so many possibilities in the world. It seems silly to put boundaries when you can. If you just ignore the boundaries, then they aren't there. You know, you can do whatever you want. If you're passionate about it, if you really. I mean, I from the age of 9 was when I remember saying to my uncle, I want to be an actor. And he said to me, if you still want to be one in 10 years, come back and we'll talk about it. And of course, we talked about it before the 10 years were up. But from that moment on, that's what I was going to be. And I did everything I could to become an actor. And when I look back, you know, the doors that were open to me was trying to get a job in a theatre. That was the first thing. And luckily, I managed to get in there and really started learning about it. And from there, you know, heard about these little one-year courses, because I was still too young to go to drama school, and got into there. And then from there, started auditioning for the 3-year drama courses, which brought me down to London. And, you know, I did everything that was available to me, and it led me down the path that is my path to where I am now. And it worked. And but there are many different ways to do it. But I think what the most important thing is really wanting to do it, you know, and believing in yourself. And when people laugh and go, yeah, right, you know, the best thing is just to feel sorry for that person, because they obviously don't believe that they could ever do something, you know. When in actual fact, people should encourage children to follow their dreams, not quash their dreams, you know. So But it's difficult. Sometimes it's easy to listen to those people and go, oh well, then I never will be able to do that, you know. But just remember, everyone who's doing it, everyone who's a musician, a pop star, a movie star, has been a child once dreaming about doing it. You know, you don't get born into it.